My girlfriend texted, "Need to cancel date night again, family crisis." I replied, "Of course, babe." Then caught her on a live TV broadcast at a basketball game with my boss. HR is getting an interesting email tomorrow. I, 29M, thought I had the perfect relationship until Thursday night shattered that illusion in the most public way possible. My girlfriend of 8 months had been canceling our plans more frequently over the past month. Always family emergencies, work crises, or sudden illness. I'd been understanding, maybe too understanding. When her text came through at 4 p.m. saying she needed to cancel our date night again due to a family crisis, I responded like the supportive boyfriend I thought I was being. The evening stretched ahead of me empty, so I ordered takeout and settled onto my couch to watch the Lakers game. I work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, nothing glamorous, but it pays well enough for my small apartment and occasional splurges. Basketball has always been my go-to stress relief, and after another canceled date, I needed the distraction. The game was intense, tied in the fourth quarter, when the camera panned to courtside seats during a timeout. My blood turned to ice. There she was, my girlfriend, wearing the red dress I'd bought her for her birthday last month, laughing and leaning into someone beside her. But it wasn't just anyone. It was Marcus, my direct supervisor at work. I sat frozen, chopsticks suspended halfway to my mouth, as the camera lingered on them for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds. She looked radiant, completely at ease, nothing like someone dealing with a family emergency. Marcus had his arm around her shoulders, and she was feeding him popcorn with an intimacy that made my stomach lurch. The commentator even made a joke about the attractive couple enjoying the game, completely unaware he'd just blown up my world on live television. My mind raced through the past month. All those canceled dates, her sudden unavailability on weekends, the way she'd been guarded with her phone lately. The times Marcus had seemed unusually interested in my personal life during our Monday morning meetings, asking about my girlfriend with what I'd interpreted as friendly concern, but now realized was something much more calculating. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through our recent conversations. Her responses had become shorter, less enthusiastic. She'd stopped sending good morning texts. When we did meet, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone and making excuses to leave early. The signs had been there, screaming at me, but I'd chosen to trust instead of question. The betrayal cut deep, but what made it worse was the sheer brazenness of it. Taking her to a nationally televised game where anyone could see them together showed either incredible stupidity or complete disregard for consequences. Given that Marcus was supposedly married with 2 kids, I suspected it was the former. I needed proof beyond what I'd seen on television. I switched to my laptop and found the game highlights that were already being posted online. There they were again, clear as day, her face unmistakable even in the grainy stream quality. I screenshot everything, saved the video clips, and began formulating a plan. Sleep was impossible that night. I kept replaying every interaction with Marcus over the past month, seeing his smug expressions in a new light. The way he'd volunteered to handle the Morrison account that I'd been working on for weeks. His sudden criticism of my presentation style during team meetings. The casual questions about my weekend plans that had seemed like small talk, but were obviously intelligence gathering. Friday morning arrived with a text from her asking how my evening was and apologizing again for the last-minute cancellation. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding that I'd had a quiet night watching basketball. Her reply was a simple heart emoji, which felt like salt in an open wound. At work, Marcus greeted me with his usual professional demeanor, but I caught him suppressing a smile when he thought I wasn't looking. During our team meeting, he announced that he'd be taking a more hands-on approach to my projects, ostensibly to help me develop my skills. The condescension in his voice was barely masked, and I realized this had probably been building for weeks. I spent my lunch break researching company policies. Our employee handbook was surprisingly thorough about relationships between supervisors and subordinates, requiring disclosure to HR and potential reassignment to avoid conflicts of interest. More importantly, it specifically prohibited supervisors from making personnel decisions affecting someone they were romantically involved with, directly or indirectly. The Morrison account situation suddenly made perfect sense. Marcus had been systematically undermining my work while secretly dating my girlfriend, creating a hostile work environment that could have serious legal implications for the company. I began documenting every instance I could remember, cross-referencing them with the timeline of their apparent relationship. That evening, I crafted my approach carefully. I couldn't confront her directly without revealing my hand too early, so I suggested dinner at our favorite restaurant for Saturday night. She agreed, though with less enthusiasm than I would have expected from someone who'd been canceling dates due to emergencies. Saturday arrived, and I dressed carefully, choosing a shirt she'd always said she loved. The restaurant was busy, filled with couples enjoying weekend date nights. She arrived 15 minutes late, apologizing about traffic, but I'd seen her Instagram story from an hour earlier showing her getting a manicure across town. Throughout dinner, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and giving short responses to my attempts at conversation. When I asked about her family emergency from Thursday, she gave a vague story about her sister having relationship troubles. I nodded sympathetically while mentally noting every inconsistency in her account. The breaking point came when her phone buzzed with a text message. She quickly flipped it face down, but not before I caught sight of a name that made my blood boil. Marcus Red Heart. The heart emoji next to his name felt like a physical slap. I excused myself to the bathroom and took a moment to collect my thoughts. In the mirror, I looked like someone who'd aged years in just a few days. But beneath the hurt, I felt something else building, a cold, calculating anger that demanded justice rather than just confrontation. When I returned to the table, I suggested we order dessert to share, something we used to do regularly. She declined, saying she wasn't feeling well and needed to get home early. I offered to drive her, but she insisted she had her own car and would be fine. As we left the restaurant, she kissed me goodbye with what felt like obligation rather than affection. I watched her drive away, already knowing this would be the last time I'd pretend not to know the truth. Sunday was spent preparing. I compiled all my evidence: the basketball game footage, screenshots of our conversations, documentation of Marcus's workplace behavior, and a detailed timeline of how their relationship had affected my professional standing. I also did deeper research into company policies and discovered that Marcus had been involved in a similar situation at his previous job, something that definitely hadn't come up during my background research when I'd first started working under him. Update 1. Monday morning, I arrived at work early and went straight to HR. Sarah, our HR director, was surprised to see me but welcomed me into her office with coffee and concern. I'd always had a good relationship with HR, having worked there for 3 years without any major issues. I presented my case methodically, starting with the workplace harassment and conflicts of interest before revealing the personal connection. Sarah's expression shifted from professional interest to genuine alarm as I showed her the game footage and explained how Marcus had been using his position to undermine my work while dating my girlfriend. She asked pointed questions about timelines, specific incidents, and my evidence documentation. I could see her mental wheels turning as she realized the potential liability this created for the company. A supervisor secretly dating an employee's partner while making adverse decisions about that employee's work was textbook workplace harassment with a personal twist that made it even more legally problematic. Sarah assured me she would begin an immediate investigation and advised me to avoid any direct confrontation with Marcus while the process was ongoing. She also suggested I might want to consider whether the relationship with my girlfriend was salvageable, though her tone suggested she already knew my answer to that question. That afternoon, Marcus was called into HR for what he probably assumed was a routine meeting. I watched from my desk as he walked confidently down the hallway, straightening his tie. He emerged 2 hours later looking significantly less composed, his face pale, and his usual swagger replaced by obvious anxiety. The rest of the week passed in a strange suspension of normal routine. Marcus avoided me entirely, communicating only through email, and even then only about essential work matters. My girlfriend continued texting as if nothing had changed, sharing mundane details about her day and making plans for the following weekend that I had no intention of keeping. By Thursday, the investigation was moving quickly. Sarah had interviewed several team members about Marcus's recent management decisions and found a pattern of questionable choices that aligned suspiciously with the timeline I provided. More damaging was the discovery that he'd accessed my personnel file multiple times without legitimate business reasons, likely sharing information about my performance reviews and salary with someone who had no right to that data. Update 2. Friday brought the resolution I'd been waiting for. Sarah called me into her office with news that Marcus had been terminated effective immediately for violations of company policy regarding conflicts of interest, harassment, and misuse of confidential information. His access to company systems had already been revoked, and security had escorted him from the building. But the story was far from over. That evening, I finally decided to confront my girlfriend directly. I invited her over to my apartment, telling her I had something important to discuss. She arrived wearing the same perfume she'd worn on our first date, a detail that struck me as either deeply ironic or cruelly deliberate. I started by asking about her family crisis from the previous Thursday, giving her one final chance to tell me the truth. She repeated the same story about her sister, adding more elaborate details that I knew were fabrications. I listened patiently, nodding in all the right places, before walking to my laptop. Without saying a word, I pulled up the basketball game footage and turned the screen toward her. Her face went through a remarkable transformation, shifting from confusion to recognition to absolute panic in the span of about 5 seconds. The silence stretched between us as she stared at her own image laughing with Marcus in high definition. I told her I knew about the relationship, about the lies, about everything. She tried to explain, claiming it had just happened, that she hadn't meant for things to go so far, that she'd been planning to tell me soon. I let her talk, watching her construct a narrative that painted her as confused rather than calculating, a victim of circumstance rather than an active participant in deception. When she finished, I calmly explained what had happened to Marcus at work, how her relationship had cost him his job and potentially damaged his career permanently. Her face went white as she realized the scope of the consequences. She asked if I'd reported them intentionally, and I confirmed that I had, explaining exactly how their secret relationship had created a hostile work environment for me. She became angry then, accusing me of being vindictive and destroying Marcus's life out of jealousy. I pointed out that I hadn't forced either of them to lie, sneak around, or use company resources to facilitate their affair. They'd made their choices, and I'd simply documented the professional misconduct that resulted from those choices. The conversation ended with her storming out, but not before declaring that she'd never intended for things to happen this way. I told her I believed that was probably true, but that intentions mattered less than actions, and her actions had shown me exactly who she really was. Update 3. The following weeks brought an unexpected sense of liberation. The constant anxiety about canceled dates and strange behavior was gone, replaced by the clarity of knowing where I stood. Work became dramatically more pleasant without Marcus's subtle undermining and condescending management style. Sarah offered me the opportunity to transfer to a different team to avoid any lingering awkwardness, but I declined. I'd done nothing wrong, and I wasn't going to disrupt my career any further because of their poor choices. The new interim supervisor was someone I'd worked with before, and the team dynamics improved almost immediately. My ex-girlfriend tried reaching out several times over the following month, alternating between apologies and accusations. She blamed me for Marcus's career troubles and claimed I'd overreacted to what she called a temporary mistake. I didn't respond to any of her messages, having learned that engaging with people who refuse to take responsibility for their actions is pointless. Through mutual friends, I heard that Marcus was struggling to find new employment, with his former colleagues apparently aware of why he'd been terminated. The marketing world in our city is smaller than people realize, and news about professional misconduct travels fast. My ex-girlfriend had apparently moved back in with her parents, claiming she needed time to figure things out. I found myself surprisingly unaffected by updates about their situations. The anger that had burned so intensely during those first few days had cooled into something more like indifference. They'd made choices that prioritized short-term gratification over honesty and integrity, and now they were living with the natural consequences of those choices. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, self-respect, and the importance of paying attention to patterns rather than isolated incidents. Red flags are called red flags for a reason, and ignoring them in the name of being understanding or supportive only enables people to take advantage of that goodwill. 6 months later, I can honestly say my life is better without either of them in it. I've been dating someone new for the past 2 months, someone who communicates directly and follows through on commitments. It's refreshing to be with someone whose words align with their actions, whose family emergencies are actual emergencies, and who doesn't feel the need to check her phone constantly when we're together. Work has been going well too. The Morrison account, which Marcus had taken from me, was reassigned to our team after his departure, and I ended up leading the project successfully. The client was impressed with our results, and I received recognition from upper management for my handling of the campaign. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh in my response, if I should have confronted them privately before involving HR. But then I remember the months of lying, the systematic undermining of my work performance, and the complete disrespect they showed for both my relationship and my career. They'd made me complicit in my own humiliation through their deception, and they'd used company resources to facilitate an affair that directly impacted my professional standing. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's simply about ensuring that actions have appropriate consequences. They chose to lie and cheat and abuse professional boundaries. I chose to document their behavior and report it through proper channels. The outcomes followed naturally from the choices each of us made. I've learned to trust my instincts more and to value transparency in both personal and professional relationships. Life is complicated enough without having to constantly wonder whether the people closest to you are telling you the truth. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop making excuses for people who consistently show you they don't deserve your trust. The basketball season is starting up again, and I'm looking forward to watching games without the emotional trauma of seeing my girlfriend with someone else on national television. It's funny how something that once brought me such pain now just reminds me of how much better my life became once I stopped accepting lies as love and manipulation as normal workplace behavior. Some people might call what I did revenge, but I prefer to think of it as accountability. They created the situation. I simply refused to pretend it wasn't happening. In the end, the truth has a way of surfacing whether we help it along or not. I just decided to stop swimming against the tide. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us. Please subscribe.